The rental market is not broken, but landlords, you've got to wake up. Today, we are looking at the most recent English housing survey. And really, what it really tells us about the private rental sector and landlords, this matters, because if you only listen to the headlines, you could think that the rental market is full of unhappy tenants, broken relationships, and impossible rules. But the data tells a more balanced story. A bit boring, so it doesn't get reported. So today, we're going to cover 5 key points. 1, most tenants are still satisfied. 2, why residents really move. 3, why possession has become more technical. 4, why notice periods are now a bigger issue. And 5, why complaints are one of the hidden risks that owners can't ignore. And before we get into it, why don't you subscribe to Maxine Lester TV, where we keep landlords up to date on all things rental, point out some pitfalls and help protect you from getting it wrong. So first, the headline you are not hearing, that most tenants are satisfied. The latest English housing survey, which covered 2024 to 2025, showed that 66% of private renters are satisfied with their tenure. That's almost 2/3 of residents saying they're satisfied with renting. Now, that doesn't mean everything is perfect. It doesn't mean that every property is well managed, and it certainly doesn't mean that landlords can afford to be casual about compliance, particularly now. But it does challenge the idea that the private rental sector is completely broken. There are great owners. We talk to them every day. There are great residents. We talk to them every day. And there are well-managed homes. We see them every day. And there's still a strong functioning rental market. But here's the important part. The market has changed. And landlords who do well are now not the ones who simply find the resident, collect the rent, and everything's okay. They're the ones who understand that evidence, communication, property standards, record keeping, and compliance are important, because this is where the risk now sits. 2, residents, tenants, move on for life reasons. Not always because something went wrong. The survey also looked at why tenants move, and the most common reason was not a terrible landlord. It was not about poor management. It was because people wanted a larger property. And the next major reason was work-related. People move because families grow, jobs change, relationships change, and life moves on. And that's important for landlords to understand. Your tenant leaving doesn't automatically mean that something had gone wrong, but when they do leave, this is when your paperwork matters. Was the tenancy set up correctly? Were the right documents served? Was the rent reviewed properly? Can come back at 12 months to actually see whether the rent was right. Were repairs lodged? Was communication clear? Could you prove what happened if the tenancy was ever challenged? Because under the Renters' Rights Act, good management is not just about being helpful, about being nice. It protects your legal position. At Maxine Lester, I think this is where we bring real value. We don't just let properties. We build proper tenancy files. We record evidence. We manage communication and help landlords avoid the mistakes that can become very expensive later. So 3rd on the list, possession. It's no longer simple. And assumptions are dangerous. The survey showed that around about 14% of residents were asked to leave because the owner wanted to sell or use the property themselves. So this was back in 25. And we understand why that was happening. Mortgage costs have gone up, tax rules have changed, compliance has become more demanding. And some owners are still reviewing whether they want to keep, to sell, to restructure their rental property. But wanting to sell or wanting to move back in doesn't mean that you can simply take the property back now that Section 21 has gone. And this is where landlords are starting to get caught out. you need to use the right ground. You need to use the right notice and use the right evidence if required. And also think about the timing. You need to know whether your tenancy file would stand up if challenged, because the most expensive possession mistakes is not always losing the case. It's losing months because something was wrong at the beginning. At Maxine Lester, we keep saying this because it matters. The best time to fix a possession problem is before the notice is served, not once it reaches court if your tenant decides not to move when the time has been set. So not once your tenant challenges it. Not once you're already under pressure, but before. Notice periods. The survey said notice periods were 2 months, but the world has moved on. And this is where landlords need to be very careful. The English Housing Survey was taken before the Renters' Rights Act came fully into force. At that point, the most common notice period tenants reported was 2 months, but the position's changed. Where the resident hasn't done anything wrong, including where an owner wants to sell or move back in, the notice period is now 4 months. And that's a major shift, as it changes the way that landlords need to plan. You may need to sell, you may need to refinance, restructure, or you want to move back into the property. You can't leave any advice until the last minute. 4 months' notice is only one part of the timeline. You also have to think about service notice, the evidence, court delays, property conditions, compliance history, and whether the right documents were given at the right time. And that's why rental property now needs to be treated like a professional business. Good intentions, they're just not enough. A clean file, clear evidence, and the right advice are essential. So finally, complaints. The quiet risk, I think, that can come back, bite you in the bum later. The survey revealed something that landlords should take seriously. Half of private renters who made a complaint were unhappy with the outcome, but most didn't take the complaint any further. Now, some of you may think, well, there was no problem then. But the way we see it slightly differently. A complaint that goes quiet has not always gone away. It may simply be sitting in the background. And if there is a later dispute over rent, repairs, property condition, deposit, or possession, that unresolved issue may return with the evidence attached. You might find that you've got photos, emails, if there had been any, messages, repair reports, dates and times, screenshots. And that's why complaints must be logged, followed up, and handled properly. It's not just good customer service. To us, it's risk management. At Maxine Lester has always been be expert, be honourable, and be personal. And that means we support landlords, but we also make sure that the tenants we work with are communicated with properly, because when both sides are treated professionally, problems are far less likely to escalate. The real message for landlords. So what does the survey really tell us? It tells us that the private rental sector isn't broken, that most tenants are satisfied with where they live. People still need good homes. There is still a demand, and there's still an opportunity for you as landlords. But the standard expected from landlords has changed. The days of casual compliance are over. Owners who will succeed will now be the ones who keep proper records, take advice early, maintain their properties, communicate clearly, and understand the rules before they act. And that's exactly where we help. Maxine Lester Lettings and Property Management has supported owners and tenants across the Cambridgeshire area since 2005. We're specialists in residential lettings. That's all we do. We're not distracted by property sales. Our focus is lettings, property management, compliance, and protecting landlords from getting things wrong. We also give free information every week, like this, because we believe that landlords should understand the risks before they become problems. So, if you own a rental property in Cambridgeshire and you're wondering whether your paperwork, your notice, your process, your rent review, or your property management would stand up under the Renters' Rights Act, why don't you give us a call? Subscribe to Maxine Lester TV for daily updates on all things rental. And if you want peace of mind that your property is being properly looked after, send us a message today. We look forward to talking with you.